Alright, as you can tell, the same goes whenever you're mixing dark over light. Generally, whenever I work with a dark color, I usually, when I make a painting, I tend to make the painting where I work with the same color until, I'm working here on his leg. I'll take the painting and go up to his hat, which is basically the same color. Then I'll go over to his book, the folder that's holding the paintings or the prints. Those are all the same tone. And whenever I use the turpenoid to blend with, number one, I just put just a little bit in there, just enough to rinse the brush out with and clean the brush. I don't fill the whole thing up. That's to keep, if you spill it, and or if you're not wasting a whole lot of it by doing this technique. But one thing I want to mention is whenever you're switching from different colors, say for example doing a landscape painting, if I'm working with a green or browns and then I want to go and switch up to the sky area to let the painting part that I just painted brown or green, when I let that dry, I'll switch over to the sky, and what I'll do is I end up wasting a little bit of the turpenoid because you don't want to mix the light and colors, dark colors together. If you go to mix, if you just take for example, I just put down sepia on this gentleman's trousers here. If I were to take and go and work on putting white on the wall here, then if I don't clean out the turpenoid, if I don't change it out, it's going to be dark. But then there's, on that note, there are certain times when that's a good thing, and then there's times when it's not a good thing to do. In this case here, doing the wall is not pure white. So if I get a little bit of, I'm planning on making the wall here a warm gray over just basic white, and I put the white down first as the base layer, and then I'm going to go over it with the warm gray to kind of get a little bit of a toning to it so that it is dark, semi-dark, and it resembles what's in the actual piece. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes if I'm working with, I can also do that with the sepia. For example, I can take and dip my brush in the turpenoid that I'm cleaning with right now. I don't know if you can see it in the video or not, but it's kind of dark. What I'm saying is you might, if you're switching from a dark color to a light color, you might want to change out your turpenoid and clean that out before doing so, because you'll have the same deal of putting down pigment on the paper with a stick. Some people blend the pastels together on paper, and I do that after I get the initial base layer done. I usually let it dry before I go back over it with a second color or additional color of the same value. But sometimes the color from the others that you just put down will get all over your stick. And see if I can find one in here in my set that has it. And I can show you as an example some that I've done here recently. Take this color here for example, if I can get it out. I don't know if you can see in the video or not, but you can see a little bit of trace of green on there. The painting I previously showed you in the first part of the series, that I was making the poppies and I was blending them together with green, so I've got a little bit of green transfer on the pastel. And you have to make sure that that's cleaned off before you use it again, because it will transfer onto your painting surface. And these pastels are much softer and creamier than the Sakura Crepas in my opinion. They should be very easy to blend. I've seen some people use the brand called Simier, and those are really soft and buttery, and I've seen people make a base layer and then go over them with a senneliers and basically make like an impasto type of oil painting, oil pastel painting really, and it's basically making brush strokes. But that's one thing to keep into consideration, is you have to make sure that you keep your pastels clean, otherwise you'll transfer the color there where you don't want it, and you can just wipe it off with a paper towel or a soft cloth to clean them. I had to do that with my set when I first got them in the mail. Half the pastels were completely out of the package and loose, so they had gotten jostled around in shipment, and with it being kind of like the first part of summer, the heat kind of melted the wax a little bit, or the pigment, and therefore they were very messy and I had to clean them up. And that's basically how I cleaned them, was by going and taking them and wiping them on a paper towel. Let's see if I can find that stick again. Show you, you just take them and wipe it off like that, and you have a nice clean pastel stick. Otherwise you'll have transfer. As I mentioned earlier about using the turpenoid, you can use turpentine if you can stomach the odors. I'm really sensitive to chemicals that are abrasive, like bleach. I have no idea where that came from. Bleach, pine sol, alcohol. I even get choked up on the smell of fresh cut wood. That's how bad I am. But anyways, if you can, turpenoid and turpentine will probably work both the same way. So, okay, this is pretty much dried back. I'm going to go over this with a shade of warm gray, 718.5. I've already got that out. Yeah, I've already used that. So I'm going to use, there's kind of like two areas of shadow there that's cast from his lead. One area is about like right here. And the second part of the shade, which is back in here, is a little bit darker. Now, when you go to mix these colors, it's the more pigment you put down, the more it's going to build up. So if you don't want a very strong tint and or tone, you just put down just very little bit of pigment. And a little bit, like I said earlier, a little bit goes a long way. You can, my little assistant over here is having a conniption fit. I think he was having a bad dream. Anyway, as I was saying, you can, a little bit goes a long way. And if you use just a little bit at a time, you can build up the layers. And you can go back in, add a little bit more if you need to. But you can't really take away. I mean, you can take away some, but that would be in a sense of using the scraping method. The scraping method is if you make mistakes, then you can go in and correct them by scraping. But typically that is is more or less best done when you've got a good solid layer of pigment down. As I mentioned here, I'm making a very light base layers, which I'm planning on building up. As you can see, I've gone over the cast shadow area there with a warm gray, and the raw umber and yellow ochre is showing through. So therefore, you know, these pastels are very transparent. Working with them is like working with transparent watercolors. Well, my lights keep flickering on and off. Hopefully we won't have a power outage. But anywho, it's basically the same as that, as using opaque and transparent watercolors. If you use transparent watercolors, it's basically the same as that. Didn't quite get that blended very well. Okay, that leads me to another tip, is using a brush to blend with, dipping it in turpenoid or turpentine, and using a brush to blend with. That creates brush strokes, which basically in essence makes it resemble an oil pastel, or I mean an oil painting. Of course it's an oil pastel painting, duh. Alright, let's see, I'm going to take a little bit of Van Dyke brown and go over some of the areas here on the bottom of this. It looks like a solid 4x4 log. And I'm going to put down a little bit of Van Dyke brown there. And then go back over that area with some sepia. It's going to be the strongest in the back because that's the cast white. I'm just going to put a very little bit down at the bottom. And then when I go to blend, I'm going to be, I can't get my tongue wrapped around anything today. I'm going to start blending at the bottom with the lightest color, which is the Van Dyke brown. And just kind of gently blend them together with the brush. And then of course you can go over the edges and kind of like feather it a little bit to make your line that's not so obvious.